Krista Luth, a warm-hearted and educated woman with a deep love for cats, was pursuing her second degree in horticulture when her relationship with Brad Cornea ended. Following their breakup, Krista began living alone in her sublet apartment, facing a financial strain now that Brad was no longer splitting expenses. To make ends meet, she planned to sell her truck and take on a part-time waitress job. During this time, Krista confided in her father that Brad had been incessantly calling her, continuing for up to 2 weeks after the breakup. On the evening of November 11, 2008, Krista chatted briefly with a neighbor as she left for a 6:30 p.m. class at a nearby greenhouse. Her friend noted that Krista seemed upbeat. However, she never arrived at class and was never seen again. Concerned friends tried to contact her, but with no response, they broke into her apartment. Inside, they found her cherished cat, Mutt, alone, along with a pan of food on the stove, as if Krista had been interrupted mid-cooking. Those close to her found it unlikely that she'd left alone and believed she must have gone out with someone she trusted. Suspicion soon turned to Brad Cornea. Investigators discovered he was the last person Krista had called before she vanished. Evidence placed him near her apartment, and a deputy testified that he'd stopped to help Brad that evening when his truck had broken down on the highway, only 8 miles from Krista's home. Brad declined the deputy's help, saying he had a tow truck on the way. Months later, investigators uncovered Krista's driver's license, debit card, and broken cell phone at the same location where Brad had been seen, and he became the prime suspect. When questioned, Brad's statements about his whereabouts were inconsistent and untruthful. In September 2009, Krista's disappearance was officially ruled a homicide, and by 2014, Brad was publicly named the primary suspect. However, her missing body meant there was insufficient evidence for an arrest. Further investigation revealed that Brad had charged over $500 on Krista's phone for pornographic content. Detectives grew increasingly convinced of his guilt, speculating that Krista might have accepted a ride with him on her way to class. He may have attempted to reconcile, and when she rebuffed him, something snapped. This theory was supported by Brad's numerous calls to her in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. The case eventually went cold. Then, in 2017, Brad was convicted on unrelated charges of sex trafficking and computer crime, receiving a sentence of 16 to 40 years. In 2021, with Krista's body still unfound and Brad well into his sentence, a warrant was issued for his arrest in connection to Krista's disappearance and presumed death. After years of waiting, authorities finally decided to act on the evidence they had, convinced it pointed squarely to Brad as her killer. With Brad Cornea officially named as the suspect in Krista's disappearance, authorities pressed forward, hoping to uncover new evidence that could lead to a conviction. The lack of a body had always been a challenge, but investigators were determined to solve the case, piecing together every bit of circumstantial evidence they could find. As years passed, friends and family members held vigils and kept Krista's memory alive, seeking answers and pushing for justice. Detectives revisited the case files, examining Brad's history and connections, hoping to uncover any overlooked details that might reveal where Krista's body was hidden. The case had not only shaken Krista's loved ones, but also captivated the local community, who remained haunted by her mysterious disappearance. In 2021, with Brad still serving his prison sentence on unrelated charges, authorities leveraged his incarceration as an opportunity to attempt a confession. They conducted several interviews, but Brad maintained his innocence, denying any involvement in Krista's disappearance. However, his ongoing refusal to provide an account that matched the evidence fueled suspicions, and detectives continued to monitor his communications from prison, hoping he might eventually slip up or reveal a clue. To this day, Krista's family still clings to the hope of finding her remains, yearning for closure in a case that has left them in limbo. Though justice has yet to be fully served, authorities remain resolute, driven by a firm belief that Brad Cornea holds the answers to Krista's tragic fate. Her loved ones continue their fight, unwilling to let Krista's story fade until they finally learn the truth and can bring her home. Barbara Tucker, the youngest of 7 siblings, was lovingly known as the baby of her family, despite towering over them at 6 feet tall. She was full of life and energy, described by friends and family as bubbly, fun-loving, and outgoing. A dedicated student and a sophomore studying business at Mount Hood Community College, Barbara was also an athlete, enjoying basketball in her spare time at Cleveland High School. Ambitious and hardworking, she excelled at a national business competition, held a summer job at Sears, and even sold handmade crafts at home. On June 15, 1980, 19-year-old Barbara called her mother, saying she'd stop by a friend's for ice cream if her evening class ended early. She set off from her apartment on Northeast 23rd Street, but tragedy soon followed. Witnesses reported seeing a struggle. One woman saw Barbara with a man in the woods near campus, while others remembered her frantically trying to flag down passing cars. Witnesses also saw a man emerge from the bushes looking wide-eyed and unsettled, and another saw him pull Barbara off the road. He was described as a young, muscular man in his 20s, around 6 feet tall, with a confident, strutting walk. Dressed in a light beige ski cap, a navy blue parka, and blue or gray pants, his appearance was so unusual that some thought the encounter was a prank. The next morning, Barbara's body was discovered in shrubs near the campus parking lot. Her family, anxiously awaiting her return, instead received the heart-wrenching news from Gresham police. Her mother, Louise Tucker, was devastated, but remained determined to see justice for her daughter, staying in constant contact with the police and district attorney's office. Her father, Albert, on the other hand, was too grief-stricken to even speak of her, leaving the room whenever her name came up. Tragically, Albert passed away in 1989, still awaiting answers, and in 1995, Louise passed as well. She left behind handwritten notes expressing her relentless hope for justice, saying, "If it takes 10 years, I don't care. I just can't let it rest." In the years following, Barbara's siblings took up the search for answers. Then in June 2021, after over 40 years, advancements in DNA technology led to a breakthrough. A man named Robert Plimpton from Troutdale was arrested for Barbara's alleged rape and murder, following a DNA match with evidence from the original crime scene. Detective Aaron Turnans, who had promised Barbara's sister he wouldn't rest until the case was solved, finally delivered on his word. Plimpton, who had a criminal record and was a 16-year-old student at the time of the murder, pleaded not guilty in his arraignment and is currently awaiting trial. As Robert Plimpton's case moved through the court system, it reignited memories and emotions for Barbara Tucker's family, who had waited decades for justice. Although her parents did not live to see this moment, her siblings continued their parents' pursuit, carrying forward the strength and determination instilled by their mother, Louise. The family, along with the Gresham community, finally felt a renewed hope that Barbara's story might find closure. For Detective Aaron Turnans, the arrest was a milestone, honoring a promise he had made to Barbara's sister years earlier. As he sifted through evidence from the 1980 crime scene, he was reminded of how technology had advanced and how years ago, DNA testing had been a distant hope. Now, it had become the key to cracking the case. Physical evidence long stored in the police department's archives was meticulously re-examined, and the DNA results pointed unmistakably to Plimpton. Plimpton, now in his 50s, had a past that included a history of violent incidents, but prior investigations in 1997 had failed to bring any convictions due to lack of evidence. Despite this history, he maintained his innocence, pleading not guilty at his arraignment. The district attorney's office revealed that, although he was only 16 at the time of the crime, Plimpton would be tried as an adult, given the nature of the charges and the severity of the crime. As the trial date approached, Barbara's family and friends braced themselves for the emotional journey that lay ahead. The years of waiting had been filled with grief and frustration, but now they held on to the hope that Barbara's story would finally have a resolution. The trial would be an opportunity for her voice to be heard once more, bringing justice not only for her but for her late parents, who had never given up on finding the truth. The case had become a symbol of persistence, both for her family and for the police force that had refused to let her memory fade. With the court proceedings underway, the Tucker family, the detectives, and the community that had once been shocked by Barbara's tragic death now had a chance to see justice pursued to its fullest extent. For all who loved Barbara, this was the moment they had long awaited, a chance at last for closure and to honor her memory with the justice she so deserved. Cara Enid Vaughn, a 40-year-old woman from Natchitoches Parish, was battling diabetes and carrying burdens she felt she couldn't share with anyone. Despite having family and friends around, Cara often felt profoundly alone. One day, she confided in her older sister, Lynn Vaughn, a CNN headline news anchor at the time, and threatened to drive her car into the Cane River. In 1993, not long after this conversation, Cara left her home with only a small amount of cash and her car keys, got into her Honda Civic, and vanished. When Cara failed to return home, Lynn grew anxious. She reported her sister and the car missing, sparking an investigation by the sheriff's office. Authorities explored every possible lead, especially considering the presence of serial killers operating near the Shreveport corridor. Lynn feared her sister might have become a victim, but no evidence or leads suggested foul play. When Lynn told police about Cara's threat involving the Cane River, investigators scoured the area, but they found no trace of her or her car, and the case gradually went cold. 19 years later, in 2012, Cara's mother passed away, never knowing what had happened to her daughter. The Vaughn family seemed destined to live with unanswered questions, though Lynn continued to pray for closure. She later shared how she begged not to die without finding out what had happened to her sister. Then, 28 years after Cara disappeared, a breakthrough came in March 2021. A fisherman spotted a vehicle submerged in the Cane River. On March 12th, the sheriff's office dive team searched the river, and by March 15th they, along with the Calcasieu Parish Marine Unit, located and retrieved a Honda Civic, the very car reported missing all those years ago. Inside the vehicle, divers discovered human remains. These remains were sent for scientific testing, and the results confirmed the remains belonged to Cara Vaughn. For the Vaughn family, it was a bittersweet revelation. While Lynn was heartbroken by the confirmation, she felt a measure of peace, knowing her sister had finally been found. She took comfort in the belief that Cara had at last been reunited with their mother, closing the chapter on a painful mystery that had spanned nearly 3 decades. Following the discovery of Cara Vaughn's remains, the Natchitoches Parish community and her family shared in both grief and relief. The sheriff's office, which had long kept the case open despite its cold status, took steps to document the final findings, adding closure to an investigation that had spanned nearly 3 decades. For Lynn Vaughn, who had carried the weight of her sister's disappearance for so many years, the moment was both healing and profoundly emotional. She expressed deep gratitude to the fisherman whose chance sighting had finally revealed what happened, and to the dedicated officers who had searched tirelessly all those years ago. Though she would forever miss her sister, Lynn was now able to hold on to the knowledge that her sister was, in some way, at peace. The case served as a reminder of how advancements in technology and luck, even years later, could finally provide long-awaited answers for families like the Vaughns. In memory of her sister, Lynn began working with local advocacy groups, hoping to raise awareness about missing persons and to encourage support for families enduring similar experiences. Angela Angie Mack Cox, born in Escondido, California, spent her early years there before moving with her family to rural Fulton County in Salem, Arkansas. Surrounded by farming land in the foothills of the Ozarks, Angie adjusted to her new surroundings and formed close friendships. Petite at 5'3" and 100 pounds, Angie was known for her blonde hair, blue eyes, and outgoing, lively personality. Friends described her as fun-loving, spirited, and always quick to pull a prank to make people laugh. But while Angie had a loyal circle of friends, her relationships with men were troubled. Angie had 2 children with 2 ex-boyfriends and eventually settled with a third partner whom she married. Her first boyfriend, Tommy Retu, was the father of her first son, Michael Mikey. Although often in trouble with the law and struggling with drug addiction, Tommy stayed involved in Mikey's life. Her second partner, Jeremy Neither Brock, fathered her younger son, Matthew. Jeremy's criminal record was extensive, spanning from 2004 to 2019, with charges including drug possession, theft, and domestic abuse. Angie's third partner and husband, James Cox, didn't have children with her. However, shortly before Angie disappeared, they were involved in a tragic head-on car accident, resulting in 2 fatalities. Afterward, Cox was jailed for possessing a firearm, leaving Angie as a single mother of 2 young children. In the summer of 2002, Angie and her older son, Mikey, disappeared from a small town 40 miles northeast of Salem. Alton, the town where they vanished, was tiny, with around 840 residents. When Angie and Mikey didn't return, Tommy Retu, Mikey's father, reported his son missing to Fulton County authorities. Sheriff Albert Al Rourke took Tommy's report, filing a missing person report for 4-year-old Mikey, who was described as a 3-foot-tall boy with light brown hair and brown eyes. However, despite her well-known presence in Salem, Angie's disappearance went unreported to law enforcement for almost 2 years. It was only in May 2004 that Angie's mother, Lorna Poole, officially reported her missing. Nearly 2 years after Tommy's initial report, the sheriff's office finally filed a missing person report for Angie. When the case was entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NamUs, a photo intended to identify Angie was mistakenly substituted with an image of a woman loosely connected to Tommy Retu, named Holly Markham Brackett. The sheriff later clarified that he was not responsible for submitting the wrong photo, and the misidentification became another frustrating setback in the search for Angie. The missteps in Angie Mack Cox's case compounded the difficulty of finding any leads. Nearly 2 years had passed since her disappearance by the time authorities officially filed her as missing, and the delayed reporting and photo mix-up only served to obscure the search for answers. For Angie's family, the pain of uncertainty grew each year, compounded by the lack of communication between local agencies and the gaps in the investigation process. Her mother, Lorna Poole, remained persistent, keeping Angie's memory alive and pushing for answers in any way she could. But despite her efforts, authorities found themselves with little evidence to follow. Leads that could have been vital in the first days after her disappearance were lost to time, and without physical evidence, the investigation remained cold. Through the years, Angie's family and friends have continued to hope for a breakthrough. Local advocates and missing persons networks began raising awareness about her case, hoping that someone might come forward with information. Angie's story has come to stand as a reminder of the need for thorough, immediate action in missing persons cases, especially in rural areas where resources are often limited. As of today, Angela Angie Mack Cox and her son Mikey are still officially listed as missing, and her family continues to hold on to the hope that one day they will receive the answers they've been waiting for. Their search for closure remains ongoing, driven by the enduring love and memory of Angie and her son. The initial response to Angela Angie Mack Cox's disappearance was marked by hesitation, which only complicated the case further. Although delays in searching for missing adults aren't unusual, Angie's situation should have raised red flags. As a single mother and sole caregiver, it was unlikely for her to abandon her young children, especially without any word to her family. Her mother's failure to report her missing for nearly 2 years further clouded the case and slowed any early investigative momentum. In 2020, the case saw a glimmer of hope when seasoned investigator Dale Weaver joined the sheriff's department and was assigned to Angie's cold case. Weaver, well acquainted with Fulton County, set out to uncover new leads. By that time, various theories about Angie's and her 4-year-old son Mikey's fate had surfaced. Some speculated wildly, suggesting that Angie might have traded her son for a bus ticket, while others suspected foul play on the night she vanished. Adding to the confusion, bizarre messages appeared online. One, allegedly from Angie's former boyfriend, claimed that she had overdosed and was buried on a property in Arkansas. Another post from a friend of Angie's, Rachel Diane, made similar claims, suggesting she had heard a confession about where Angie might be buried. However, these theories remained unverifiable, with little concrete evidence to guide investigators. Tragedy struck once again when Tommy Retu, Angie's first boyfriend and the father of Mikey, passed away under distressing circumstances. Tommy had initially reported Mikey missing and had stayed involved in his son's life. In 2020, after being arrested during a traffic stop, he reportedly swallowed a dangerous combination of substances. Although he showed signs of severe distress, jail staff, believing he was detoxing, left him unchecked for over an hour. Tommy eventually died in the hospital, and an investigation concluded that he was not involved in Angie's or Mikey's disappearance, as he had maintained a positive relationship with Angie and actively participated in his son's life. The case remained cold for many years until a critical discovery came to light in October 2020. Investigators found that, weeks before Angie disappeared in September 2002, she had left Mikey with a couple in Alton, Missouri, hoping they would adopt him. The couple had agreed, but before anything was formalized, Angie left for California, never to return. This new information reignited hope that answers might still be found, leaving Angie's family and friends waiting and hoping for closure as the investigation into her disappearance continued. Angie Mack changed her mind about giving up her son for adoption and decided to buy a bus ticket to Springfield, Missouri, to retrieve him. When she arrived, at least one of the adoptive couple, Clarence and Barbara Cruzen, picked her up from the bus station and took her to their home. This marked a significant turning point in the investigation into Angie's and her son Mikey's disappearance, as it was the first substantial lead in years. At this stage, the FBI became involved, and Angie's husband, James Mack, along with his brother, Jeremy Cox, who were both in custody, were interrogated. They provided details about the Cruzens, the couple in Alton who were involved in the adoption. However, at that point, Clarence was already deceased, having been shot in a mysterious incident in a county called Laredo. Barbara confirmed that she had picked Angie up from the bus station after she changed her mind about the adoption. She also falsely claimed that her husband had seen Angie off, but Angie's mother, Lorna Poole, knew this was a lie since Jeremy was incarcerated at the time. As Barbara began spinning a complicated web of lies, investigator Dale Weaver recognized that she and her deceased husband were the last known people to have seen Angie alive. Weaver requested a polygraph test for Barbara, and on April 2, 2021, she failed miserably. Following her failure, Barbara confessed that her husband had murdered both Angie and Mikey and disposed of their bodies in a furnace on their property. On April 9th, the Fulton County Sheriff's Office confirmed that both Angela Mack and Michael Retu were victims of murder. After nearly 2 decades of uncertainty, the case appeared to be solved, but numerous questions remained unanswered. Why did Angie initially want to give up her son? Was his father aware of this decision? What about Angie's mother, Lorna, who had remained silent for years when she could have reported her daughter missing sooner? Additionally, why didn't the police take the situation more seriously before investigator Dale Weaver's involvement? This case is particularly troubling as it raises more questions than it answers, creating an impression of a cover-up rather than a straightforward resolution. Despite being declared solved, the complexities surrounding Angie's disappearance leave many doubts that may never be fully resolved. Despite the closure brought by the confirmation of Angie's and Mikey's murders, many lingering questions cast a shadow over the case. Angie's motivations for initially considering adoption remained unclear. Was it a result of her difficult relationships with the fathers of her children? Or was there a deeper, more personal reason behind her choice? Additionally, the role of Lorna Poole, Angie's mother, raised further concerns. Her delay in reporting Angie missing, along with her apparent indifference during the years leading up to the discovery, left investigators puzzled. Lorna had been aware of Angie's struggles and the chaos in her life, yet she did not act until nearly 2 years after her daughter's disappearance. What led to this inaction? Was she hiding something, or did she genuinely believe her daughter would return? The local law enforcement's handling of the case also faced scrutiny. Why did they not take Angie's disappearance more seriously, especially considering her history as a single mother and the circumstances surrounding her life? The initial assumption that a mother would abandon her young child seemed far-fetched, yet it took years before anyone truly looked into the case. As more details emerged from the investigation, it became evident that the local community had not fully comprehended the gravity of Angie's situation. Friends and family had seen the changes in her life, but were unable to connect the dots leading to her disappearance. Furthermore, the involvement of the Cruzens posed additional questions. Barbara's confession revealed a shocking and violent end to Angie and Mikey's lives, yet the motives behind Clarence's actions remained a mystery. What could have driven him to commit such heinous acts? As investigators continued to sift through the complexities of the case, it became clear that the resolution was only a surface-level conclusion. The emotional toll on Angie's family, particularly her surviving son Mikey, weighed heavily on the community. The tragic loss of 2 lives, intertwined with a series of unanswered questions, served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating impacts of neglect and violence. In the aftermath, as the community grappled with the revelation of the murders, they also mourned the years lost to uncertainty and silence. While Angie and Mikey had finally received justice, the shadows of their tragic story lingered, leaving behind a legacy of pain and a call for deeper reflection on the circumstances that led to such a devastating loss. The case underscored the importance of vigilant community awareness and the need for swift action in missing persons cases, reminding everyone of the critical need for compassion and proactive engagement in the lives of those around them.